energy.
I have. Okay, man.
Oh Lord, look at this.
Hey.
Good morning. Why? Request. Good morning, you all. Gastelgoud. And good day. We're here amongst the tangled web of, this is like technological dream catcher.
Oh my God, seriously.
The Iron Maidens are all around us. But through that, you can see this pyramidical bluff, basalt bluff.
Yeah, I wish we could find a great spot. I mean, it's so important.
Yeah, you've just got too much.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
So that catches your eye every time, doesn't it? I mean,
yes, it does. From up there, you look up and down. You can see down up the Columbia, and my great granddad, when he was a young man, he had to bring his grandfather up there, and they went up through either this one or the next canyon over, and this was in 30 years, 1885 approximately,
really?
When he took him up there, and he went through this route. His grandfather wanted him to take him there, and of course, as a young man, you did the bidding of whatever your elders asked you.
Sure.
And so he took him up there, not knowing why, but they got up there in the mid-morning, probably around 10 or 11 o'clock, and they sat up there, and he said the old timer, he just sat there and stared up and down, and with tears rolling down his eyes, he told him that there was a time in which they had heard about Shama, white people, other people, but they thought the story almost too fantastic to believe.
Yeah.
Kind of like believing in the unicorn and stuff, almost too fantastic. Then coming up from Malaga, which we call Malacha in our language, which means liars, here come Isaac Stevens up the river, so we call it Liar's Trail. Malacha has nothing to do with Spanish grapes or anything.
Really?
Now, they just overlaid that on our name for it, Malacha. He came up by Malacha. Well, anyway, the old man was saying that there was a time that we would make encampments from Rock Island all the way to East Wenatchee. There would be one solid encampment going up there.
Oh, now there's a visual.
Yeah, Isaac Stevens arrives here with his scouting peace treaty delegation. They were, doing a reconnaissance of the area. Mm-hmm. And he said when they arrived in the camp, when they arrived there across the river, there were about 15,000 of us in the encampment. 16,000. Mm-hmm. And finally he said, we believed. We saw it and we believed. They do exist. And he said, here we are 30 years later. He said, at one time, we were never a people big in numbers, but back then there were 30,000 of us, Napascosa people. He said, and here we are 30 years later, and there's 150 of us. And he sat there and he lamented that story and sang this song to help us live through. And he said, I don't know what we did that was so terrible. I have no idea what we did that was so bad that the Creator would visit upon us all these things. The diseases, the destruction of their whole way of life. They didn't realize that down below there were fish wheels on the river. They were taking all the salmon. Mm-hmm. And when will it end? Who will save us? And that was his cry, and then he sang this very, very mournful song. And fast forward, growing up, every night I would go and sit with him and my younger brothers, and he would always sing this song every night as a reminder. He said, you have no idea how it feels last one of many people, the last speaker, the last one of a people. He said, when we were down to 150 people, he said, that's how we felt, that we may wake up and be the last. And with it goes all the stories, with it our footsteps and our touch on these rocks. Everything here was so familiar with us. Everything here was familiar to us.
Mm-hmm.
There was no rock that laid out here that we had not speculated upon. Rocks were their raw materials.
Hmm.
So I guess the love of geology comes naturally, and it's kind of deep-seated in my DNA.
Yeah.
Everywhere here, like right there, there's that little area right there, that outcropping. There's an outcropping there of basalt that we call Coyote's card table. It's this basalt column sticking up out of the ground, and in the center is one. And so what I'm getting to is every square, every square mile, every, cubic yard of this area is a familiar, and for some reason it's locked into you. It's in your DNA, it's in your genes, it's in your history memory banks. This ancient familiarity, and it reaches out to us. Our people who come through here, the Pascosa people, the Moses Columbia people, the Wenatchee people, they feel this sense of connection. So that's my spiel.
And you still do.
And I still do. Every week I'm out here. And the longer I live, the more I find it necessary. It's like as drug addicts would say, I need a bump. This is my bump. I need an upper. I need. It's a high unto itself, and you can see why as you.
Well, it's so from without knowing much, you can just drive up this place and know it's special. I mean, for so many different reasons. And it's close to where you live in Wenatchee.
Mm-hmm.
And why else is Moses Coulee singled out for you as a place to regularly return? Like, are there other canyons that are similar?
Yeah, there are, but this in here, because my granddad and my relatives in the 60s, the 50s and 60s, mind you, that's just 50 years or 60 years after they were all herded to the reservation.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were still alive in the 50s and the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And this was their major thoroughfare from north to south when they were on horseback, as opposed to the river, which was really hard to get along. You had all these roadblocks.
Sure.
Like there was cliffs, there was water, other rivers cutting through.
Interesting.
This here is just a dry highway, and you see how flat it is.
What an amazing way to describe this. This is a dry highway.
Yeah.
It is. And this canyon without a river in it, in an Ice Age flood's history. Wow. So this was a main connector. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Between
this was the bypass.
Yeah.
we put it in contemporary terms. This was the bypass.
Huh.
And
so in the 50s and 60s, they are remembering. They've spent much of their life going up and down this coulee.
Yes. With every, when I would take, Grandpa would have me drive his relatives and him up and down. Every 2 weeks or so, we would take this. As life got easier for him in his older age, he just liked remembering. So we would pick up my Uncle Louis Wapato and my great uncle Sam George, who was at that time almost 100 or maybe a little older. And we would drive up and down. We would come down this way, sometimes all the way down to Frenchman's Coulee, where my great-great-granddad was born, right there at the Feathers in that bowl.
Is that
That's
right?
where their encampment was. That was their village. And so we would drive from the reservation. We always preferred coming through Bridgeport than down this way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I swear to God, every mile we were stopping. I mean, not all at the same trip, but when we're coming down, my aunt would say, "Oh, pull over, pull over, pull over." So I'd pull over. She'd say, "Anna, ich habe and she would point at something, and she would stand there and stare off into, I think she was staring off into another world or another time. And she would sit there, and she'd stand there and she would talk in Indian about this place and how, her sister Madeleine and her were up there picking berries, picking Shiaya sarvis berries, and this big ugly snake was sitting there, and it was like it was talking to them. There was a bull snake, and you know how they growl. And she's Indian. They laughed, and she was saying, "Madeleine, I think your boyfriend has found you. Go kiss it." See, those are the type of conversations that we would have. And then we go a little farther, and then great Uncle Sam, Topa, we call him. He was just a name of endearment. Anna. So I'd pull over, and he'd get out, and yeah, this is where that white soldier, Colonel Wright, he came down, and he was going to ambush Quetalhan, Chief Moses, and he was trying to be sneaky, he's trying to be cagey, and so he tells Chief Moses, "Why don't you take 10 men and I'll take 10 men, and we'll meet in Moses Coulee. We'll meet in this Nchach, we call this Nchach." And Chief Moses suspects that it's a trap. So he sends out runners, and from those runners came warriors from the able-bodied men. We wouldn't call them warriors, that's a little bit too John Wayne-ish, but able-bodied men, people, defenders. And some of them were really, they had a real grievance with the military because of the past encounters.
Sure.
So here comes Wright riding up through the canyon, and he sees at a distance, the scouts, and he said, "Yeah, well, I guess in their minds, be prepared. When he comes, we're just going to take him and lynch him."
Oh.
They had no intentions of bringing him to court or to justice. In their minds, they were just going to end it. Well, all of a sudden, he realizes he's being outflanked on both sides of the canyon, and we'll come to it up here.
Yeah.
This is where Colonel Wright realizes he's riding into quite possibly a trap. And Chief Moses had already figured out that he was being set up. So he had brought or enlisted many, many, many young men, and maybe women, to confront Wright. And as we go up here, Wright sent out his courier, and Moses sent out his. Then they came together right up here.
Okay.
And Wright's trying to make small talk. It's like he knows that Chief Moses is very versed and knowledgeable in English. So Wright looks at him and says, "Good day." And Moses looks up. It is a nice day," he said, and he leans over on his horse and he goes, "Have you not anything better to do today than die?" Chief Moses had assembled between 300, 400, maybe even 500 men. And they were anxious to dispatch Wright. Wright had 150 men or so. And so Wright just goes, "Yeah," and turned around and headed back to the Dells. Well, hearing this from this is my great-great-grandfather's interpretation of what happened.
Sure.
As he remembered it.
Yep.
And so I can't get much closer to the
Well, right. Yes.
to the fact. And so I've read in different books this account, but his still rings the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Cross-referencing theirs, yeah, I can see some of the same story here, but you lose it without the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the facial expressions and everything.
Oh, yes.
Okay, this is where old-time people used to come, and they would scrape I guess that's lichens.
Yep.
They would scrape the lichens off onto a card. But then up in the canyons here, there's mineral outcroppings, ferrous oxide, other types of minerals that leach out onto the rocks in the springtime from the moisture and the heat.
Okay.
And so my granddad said when he was a kid, him and his brother, my Uncle Hank, would have to go up there with I guess you could say, from the direction of my great-great-grandmother, their great-grandmother. They would go up and they would scrape the pigments. They would scrape the lichens off onto little cards, and they would bring them back to her, and she would mix her paint. Old-timers, only women possessed that knowledge of paint. Kind of like the Monets, the Van Goghs, where they mixed their own pigments.
Yeah.
And they all specialized. They all had their own, this is Coulee City 2. This is Moses Coulee 2. This is Moses Coulee Red. Oh, and everybody. Oh, good. That was wonderful.
Refreshing?
Yes. So there's so many things. My grandpa he would take me or I'd go with him to places, and he would sit there and he'd look down. He goes, like when we're up here in Douglas County, up in the, I guess that's the Foster Creek drainage. And we're looking at this little lake, Kidney Lake. And we're looking from a point of view like from here down at the lake. And he goes, what do you see? Why do you think the people came here? And I tell him, God, how many times have I made this mistake? I would tell him, well, it's pretty. And shake his head. Once and for all, Randy, you cannot eat pretty. Oh yeah. There's probably, it's a lake. There's probably fish there. No, we didn't eat little stinkfish, sardines and guppies. That's not our. No. He said, when I look at this, I see the grocery store, the drugstore, and the hardware store, all right there, all of it. I tell him, it's kind of like, what are you on? But you dare not say anything like that.
No, that's right. That's right.
Well, you're seeing something that I'm not. He goes, yeah. He said, because the food, the roots that grow around there that we harvest or that we exploit here, that we come here for, there's roots here. And every area you go to, the roots have a different taste based upon the soil it comes from. So a bitter root here is not a bitter root over there. Mm-hmm. What you're eating here, you may be using as medicine from over there. So he said, so you have your foods, you have roots, you have these long, like cattail tubers. What's under the ground? He said, then there's berries, the shia, the sarvisberry, the choke cherries, the coyote currants, the golden currants. They're all here. And then you have the water, which is like medicine to us. If you got dry skin, itchy skin, I guess what he's talking about is eczema or seborrhea. You go lay in that and you pack the mud on you, that soil. The Creator gave us different flavors of soil, different flavors of dirt. Yeah. And some of it is medicine. And so when you come down here, you say, you tell it, you thank it. You thank the Creator for this medicine, and you take it, you put a little bit in your mouth. Because nothing in this world, nobody in this world comes closer to this land than our people who have lived here since before the beginning of time. We're a part of that soil. We're a part of that we say, the Holy Mother Earth. So we put it in our mouth as a, what do you call that? As a connector, but also as a thank you and a reminder of who we are. And so we do that. And then when I look at it, he said, I see the cattails, the bulrushes coming up. They use that for mats, for the architecture, for your dwellings, for the lodges, for our table. It is everything. And then I look at the stakchin, one of the plants. It's a, I guess you could say, a number one go-to pharmaceutical for us.
Okay.
But only in certain areas does it maintain this power, the intensity. And so that's how we see Moses Coulee. It has all of these places like that. And from those cliffs, great grandma got the paints that only women were allowed to know. Only women knew this secret. Men chipped rocks, petroglyphs. Women painted. Women created. Men, I guess you could say, destroyed. We took things down. Women, I guess you could. One brings life, the other is creating life by taking it. Yeah, when it was this spring, earlier, a few weeks ago.
Okay. I see. Just recently.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago it came through.
Sunflowers everywhere.
And this was probably the greatest, most epic sunflower bloom or wildflower bloom I have seen in my life.
It's been quite a spring for those flowers, hasn't it?
It has. And so all of the undeveloped agricultural land here was just a sea of sunflowers. And we were coming out here daily because we just wanted to take this in. And then the sunflowers were replaced by lupins, blue and sulfur lupins. And it just kept, there was just one, it was just rolling out one sheet after another. And I'm going, no wonder my grandfolks loved this area so much. It was so powerful and beautiful. And the scents, I got out and I listened to everywhere you were at, you heard meadowlarks everywhere this year. Meadowlarks, bluebirds. And if you closed your eyes and let your mind go, you could understand this draw to this area. Birds that I'm familiar with the sound, but I don't know the names of them, other than, I know Shoyapi names, which is like the sage thrush, the buntings, the tanagers, and meadowlarks. They were everywhere. Kind of like I was saying, recovering from COVID, the overall effects it seemed kind of negligible. But then as the months progressed, as things unrolled, I realized, when you put something away for safekeeping, you never go back to it until you need it.
Right.
Like, I got to hide this before somebody breaks in and steals it, type thing.
Right. But
then when you one day go to it, you find out that it's missing. Up here, same way. After COVID, and I started feeling better and getting out and talking to people, I would try to reflect back, and all of a sudden I realized what I had put away was gone. And this is a real recent occurrence, because before my mind was a steel trap for information. Now the steel trap has been, I don't even know where it's at anymore. So, refreshing myself, And I found this trick that my grandfather used to use. As he got older, my great-granddad, and I guess he was approaching 100 or so, he found that happening. You know, there was, his memory seemed to be slipping. And so I would take him out here, and he would walk around and he would pick something, smell it, close his eyes, smell it, put it in his mouth and taste it. Bang, you're right back to when you were 7 years old and first tasting that.
Yes.
And it was triggering all of these missing pieces to the puzzle. And so I've been doing that. I come out here, the smells, the sounds, the tastes, eating dirt. Seems like a strange thing to do, right? But you recall as a kid, that wasn't so strange.
Yep.
You're all a bunch of dirt eaters. And so I do that. I take clay and I put it in my mouth. And it really, unleashes or lets go all these memories. Keep your eyes closed because you don't want any periphery blinding your taste or interfering, conflicting. And so little by little it's coming back.
It's working.
It's working. Yeah.
Reconnecting, relearning, remembering.
Yes, that's right. Rewiring. Because everything got short-circuited and there's some synapses that aren't snapping.
So it was over the winter that you experienced the COVID?
From November on. And I understood that there were people who were going through experiencing, my brother for one, Ernie, hello Ernie, who were experiencing some of the same problems. General overall fatigue.
Yes.
And you're going really gung-ho, feeling like, I'm over this. Then an hour later, bang, you hit a wall. And it's not just running out of energy. Your brain seems to be just all of a sudden, you're disoriented. Many things happen. And so we started comparing notes, and sure, this is one of those, we're long haulers. And some of these maladies or symptoms or whatever you want to call them seem to be new arrivals. So you think you get over one thing, then something else comes up.
Goodness.
So maybe it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, let's hope not. So Ernie and others are kind of where you are as far as recovery?
He seems to be having, well, like me, he's experiencing new things continually happening. And
are you guys able to get back together, like physically? Or
yeah.
Okay.
He comes down, and he and his wife, Roberta, Roberta, they come down to dig roots. You know, if you're in north central Washington, the isolation factor, not the isolation, the remoteness factor is pretty, it's a given. So when they want to go to a good hospital, good clinic, they come down to Wenatchee. So I'm able to connect with them. DUI, driving, or DWI, driving with Indians. See, you see the pigment there, the lichens, or whatever you call them. Then above, there's some more red.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And they would scrape that and save it. Oh, right beside it, some red, or a browner red. And they mix that with a mineral pigment, and then with either berry juice and oils. But it would take this and turn it from this sulfur-looking yellowish green to a rich fern green. And being that they're mineral pigments, they didn't degrade over years, centuries. The color still remains.
Wow.
So that's what you see, the rock paintings. That is the magic that was needed to preserve these rock paintings that you see, pictographs.
Sure.
That are thousands of years old. And a lot of what we gathered, like here, this is an elderberry. It's a blue elderberry. Blue elderberries, they're just kind of lackluster when it came to as a food. But as a medicine, it was wonderful. And as a tonic, and as a mordant for your paintings, your rock painting. They would ferment the juice and they would mix it with the, yeah, I see that smile. They would mix it with the pigments.
That's cool.
And it was the mordant that bonded it to the whatever you were painting. And they would use different mordants for different materials. If you're going to paint on rock, they would use a different binder. If you were painting on rawhide, they would use. See, that's the magic. That's chemistry that only Indian women had. Us men, they kept us in the dark. They didn't want us to have too much knowledge. It's like too much knowledge. What do I need you for? I think go out. They kept you bound. Else. So all along here, along these cliffs, there are these holes, caves. Old time people, I'm saying first ancestors.
Yes.
Utilized those. This is back before the beginning of time, back before the Missoula glaciers. Because we were still wild animals then. That's how we view ourselves. This is before we were given, what comes first, the people or the laws? The laws, because without laws that the Creator gave us, we wouldn't be people. So, and from the animals, from the animal people, we learned all kinds of things, and it took us out of being a scared, cowering people hiding in rock shelters to architects of our own structures. Coulee mat lodges, teepees. From Badger, we learned how to build these underground pit houses and burrows, basically. So, catch this one here.
Oh, I got to get out for that one.
Yeah. There's your eagle. Oh, that's a red-tailed hawk. So I'm just going to, our creation stories take us back to a time when the great hero twins, Red Star and Blue Star, they were secreted away as babies into a cave here in Moses Coulee. And in darkness, they thrive. Every night, one of the animals, whether it's Mayan, Wolverine, Bulia, Gopher, would come in and talk to them as babies and explain to them, this song, this is my song, and would sing it to them and give them, transfer their knowledge to the twins. Every night there was a different animal from the world. Sometimes it wasn't even an animal. Sometimes they would hear somebody singing. They would hear a voice singing. And it was the voice of the gray sage, or it's the voice of the bitterbrush, imparting their song of power. So all knowledge is being fed to them. And it was in a cave like this one day the time has arrived that they're to be shown their destiny. And so they were brought forward in the cave, closer and closer, a little more light every day, so that their eyes are adjusting to the light. Finally, they're brought out into the open. And standing there, the voice of the Creator, Shmi'au, Coyote, in the embodiment of Coyote, is waiting for them, because there's a whole lot of shit going on. And these young hero twins, they are going to be the great exactor. They are the resolution to all the manic that's going on. I don't need to translate that, do I? All the manic that's going on. And so we never say which cave, we just assume that any one of these beautiful big caves would be one of the caves in which they are. I guess you could say, I've been told where the cave is, but I just use this generalization so I don't have cave creepers coming around, digging around.
Oh yeah.
We always go with the knowledge that if we say something that's sacred, people will be there to root around. Well,
I understand.
So I just generalize. This is
Yeah.
it just giving you a sense. And it does look pretty majestic.
Well, yes, and the smells. I mean, this
Oh, yeah,
what you were talking about before. I mean, this
when I'm
is-
walking up the trail, I'm taking bits, put it in my mouth, move it around. And right now I can tell you where that I was when I first tasted that. When I first recall that. When I was 4 years old. So, if you ever want to reconnect with your past, walk around and pick up things that you're familiar or seem familiar with in a sense, how would you say it? The sense of smell brings you back to help remember things.
It really does.
When I'm walking up the trail here, I'm looking at the ayu, a plant we call ayu, right here. It's a powerful medicine plant that we use, but it's a reminder. I take the seeds. Take one of the seeds and taste it. Just kind of chop it with your teeth, then remove it.
Oh,
Powerful, isn't it?
it is powerful.
It's like dill. It's got that that same sort of sharpness. Well, that's what we do to remember. And I guess something should be. I keep saying we do things to remember. Remembering is probably one of the greatest gifts that people just take for granted. When I was saying I would bring my old-time people down here, my relatives, my ancestors, I would drive them down here so that they could remember. What is the importance? What is the functioning of that?
Yeah.
The function of it is that through our lives, in our Indian world, in our not so distant past, things have conspired to destroy the circle of life that we live in. Whether you call it the great hoop of life, the great circle of life, the medicine wheel, the dream catcher. It's a circle. It's a perfect, what do I say? Again, COVID brain.
Doing great.
It's perfection. Never ending. The never ending circle. Well, we thought, but since the coming of Western civilization, our world has been shattered, and this hoop has been shattered. Whether it be war, whether it was pestilence, whether it was disease, as my mother, Mary Miller Marchand, would say, I don't know what killed more, diseases or Jesus. But they all conspired in the destruction of this circle, the destruction of our world. And little by little, it's been eroded, corroded, and destroyed. So when I would drive people down here, my family down here, they would have me stopping everywhere, like here, just to make a connection. They were remembering. And it's very, very spiritually medicinal for mental health, for spiritual health. They would remember. And what is the opposite of dismember? Remembering. They're remembering and they're reattaching those missing pieces of that hoop. So what we do here seems random, arbitrary. It's not. It's a gift to be able to remember. A lot of people can't remember. So if you see people, it's like now I'm tasting I'm getting a different sensation from that. It triggers all of these, I don't know what you call them, neurons in your head and your brain, but it helps to make bridges for things that have been missing for a while. In our old life, before we became people, we probably, every one of these was utilized either as storage, as living. You know, we were just literally food for everything. That was the role of, I think, human beings back in the early days. But then the Creator gifted us with help, I guess you could say, with the help of all of the animal people. We were given laws. One of the major laws was, this is basically, I'm giving you this garden. Take care of this garden and it'll provide you with everything that you need to live. We did not have to leave here for what we needed. It was rich. Somebody said, well, did you have like seafood and stuff like that? Nor did we know about it. So right. You don't need what you don't know about.
Yes.
Or you don't crave it. What did you do without lobster? Oh, we had roaches. We had bugs of our own.
Those are exotic. Yeah.
Now, you look up here, and when you look at the cliffs, you'll see all of the twists and turns that the basalt, that these rock have. And in our world, that's a special design. Nothing is random. It's all designed. Whether you call it, evolution, or the Hoyanch Oten, the great mystery, the Creator, it's all perfectly designed. And I think one of the things that it's there for is to pique your curiosity. It keeps your mind going. I know coming through this canyon, coming through this coulee, every time I come through here, I see something different. And I ask myself, I wonder what the Creator was thinking there. What was Coyote thinking there when he was shaping this? Because he gave us so many different layers here.
Yeah.
So many levels to be curious about. How can you be bored in a world like here? How can you be bored with so much geology? And I'm going to emphasize geology. Indians are incredible geologists. Indians who grew up, I'm saying the term Indian loosely, Indians who grew up with an orientation for their land, an orientation and a familiarity with their surroundings. They've got to be geologists. They're naturalists. They're environmental scientists. Because everything about them, everything around them is a part of this very complex world. So the more you understand it, the better equipped you are at living in it. I think a lot of people look at our deserts and they go, God, how could you live there easily?
Yes. Yeah.
The bigger question is, how can you live on Broadway in Seattle? Where everything there is an assault to every sense you have, if you have any sense.
And you can say that because you lived there for a while.
Oh my God, yes. Seattle, Chicago, and New York. Oh, here comes the